Let's welcome in from Locked On Lions, Matt Dery. Matt, Ben Johnson is reported before he's even been interviewed by the Panthers to be a favorite, a leader in the clubhouse, and somebody that owner David Tepper has been enamored with. So I guess just watching his offense for just one season as offensive coordinator there in Detroit, why do you think an owner would become, quote, enamored with a candidate like Ben Johnson?
Well, Nick, I mean, he's a bright young mind, kind of in that Sean McVay, I guess, mold. I know people are getting tired of hearing that, but it's true. I mean, you want to talk about a young man that just last year, during the 2021 season, when the Lions won 3 games, was basically just a tight ends coach and a guy that had a connection to Dan Campbell in Miami. Then all of a sudden, Anthony Lynn gets fired as OC midway through the season. Ben Johnson has a bigger effect on the offense, has a great relationship with Jared Goff. The offense gets better under Dan Campbell kind of running the show. Lynn kept his job as OC, but got stripped of the play calling duties. And then this year, you hand Ben Johnson that OC job. There really was no question about it. He was getting it because he was that highly thought of by the Lions. And then this year, the Lions offense was just really, really good. And this was without Jamison Williams for most of the year. This is with DeAndre Swift hurt. This was with a kind of a cast off from Green Bay running back Jamal Williams running for 1,000 yards and 17 touchdowns. Ben Johnson's got that kind of it factor as a young mind that the play calling was spectacular at times, turned guys around. Jared Goff became a really, really good player. Journeyman tight end group without TJ Hawkinson, once he was traded, became pretty effective. And he's a good talker and a good interview. So I don't think there's any question Ben Johnson likely won't be back with the Lions next year. He's going to get a job somewhere.
So yeah, clearly all came together for Ben Johnson and this Lions offense this year. Is what was different about the play calling? Was there a level of creativity that was noticeable? Were there more explosive plays than, had been seen before Ben Johnson took over? What kind of identity did he really try to establish? And obviously, Dan Campbell's the head coach and he ultimately sets that overall. But under Ben Johnson, what did there appear to be as the identity?
That's a great question, Nick. I mean, I think the identity was be tough and be strong and run the football and all of that. But in reality, there was a level of creativity that we haven't seen here in a long, long time. That hook and ladder play in Week 18 took some stones to call that play, and he did it. He put players in the right positions to where they were ready to succeed and do well. 4th and 1 at the Jets on the road, down a score, and he's got a play pass call with Frank Reich coming across the formation, and he just fooled the living out of the Jets, and there's a 49-yard touchdown. I mean, there were calls like that throughout the year. Penei Sewell on a tackle eligible on a 4th down to end the game against the Vikings. These are plays all off the top of my head. I'm not sitting here with a script here, Nick. I mean, I'm remembering like they were yesterday because they were that good. They were that creative. And it's not like Ben Johnson was on the sideline high-fiving everybody or saying, look at me, look what I've done. He was totally about the team. He fit the culture. And but he came up with some stuff that really enabled the players to be empowered, and they liked him for that very much so.
Yeah, I think everybody outside of Detroit and maybe they're in Detroit was surprised at the season that Jared Goff has had. Was there anything that really tied those two together that Jared Goff, really credited Ben Johnson with the turnaround that he had this season?
Well, like I said, I think 2 years ago, the 2021 season, the first year under Dan Campbell, there just wasn't chemistry between Goff and then offensive coordinator Anthony Lynn. There was chemistry with Ben Johnson. I think Johnson probably behind the scenes was telling Jared, we're going to get you up and running. It's going to be all right. And then Goff wanted Johnson to get the OC job. And then the first thing that Ben did this year in 2022 was sat Johnson down, and they went over all the successful plays that were run under McVay in LA with the Rams and Goff. And they're like, let's use some of these. And it wasn't about Ben Johnson saying, I'm going to diagram these. It's like, let's take some plays that you had when you were successful, and why not use them here? And that's what they did. Jared Goff had a renaissance this year. So, and this is not to say, look, Amon-Ra St. Brown is a really good football player. Didn't make the Pro Bowl, didn't make All-Pro. There's really one Pro Bowl player on that offense, and that was Frank Reich, the center. So it's not like it's chock full of all these guys. This isn't Josh Jacobs and Devontae out in Vegas as first team All Pros. The Lions didn't have any All Pro players on that offense yet. It finished what, the top five under Ben Johnson? What does that tell you? It tells you that the scheme and some of the talent certainly got better. And Penei Sewell, you could argue, is an All Pro player, and same with Ragnow and Amon-Ra. But Ben Johnson made it go a little bit. He did a great job.
Obviously it's a different job being a head coach as opposed to offensive coordinator. There's so much more to it. Ben Johnson is one of the youngest head coaching candidates out there right now, but appears to be, one of the hottest. What you've kind of been able to observe about Ben Johnson in a pretty short period of time makes you think or not think that he would be fit for basically running an organization, so to speak? There will be a general manager and an owner, but sitting in that chair, making those decisions at 36 years old with, for his age, pretty extensive experience in the NFL, but also compared to Steve Wilks, Frank Reich, some other candidates, kind of a fraction of the experience that they have in this league.
I don't know if he can do it. I mean, that you ask a very good question. I mean, I think he won over all of the rooms, the offensive line room, the quarterback room, certainly the running backs, tight ends, and receivers. They all seem to like it. Look what's going on in LA. I mean, the Chargers knew they had to make a move and get rid of Joe Lombardi, their offensive coordinator. Joe Lombardi was here in Detroit, and there was friction when he called plays. Golden Tate came on my radio show many years ago and said the other team knows our plays. When we're coming out of the huddle and they're telling us, oh, we know what's coming. That never happened here. There was no chaos. There was no backbiting. I mean, Ben Johnson seemed to, for a young guy, like you said, really take ownership of this offense. Dan Campbell could have easily kept calling the plays. He let Johnson do it because he had faith in him. But again, to ask me, Nick, if I think, oh, he's definitely going to get the job done as a head coach, you're right. That's a totally different bird. You got to run the special teams and the defense, and you got to be in charge of a lot of different things. But I think what he's learned under Dan Campbell and about culture and chemistry, which is what the Lions have really been about these last 2 years, I think he'll take some of that to Carolina. So there's not some of those Robbie Anderson issues or whatever you guys have had down there. And I think he'll do okay. But again, first time head coach, you just never know. I mean, we were enamored with, keep using the Charger example, but we were enamored with Brandon Staley. We were enamored with Dan Campbell. At one point, Dan Campbell was what? 3-13-1 and then 1-6. So he was 4-19-1 at one point. People wanted to run him out of town. Now he's a genius 10 games later. So tough to say, but I'll tell you, Johnson's impressing a lot of people.
And last question, just kind of turning it back towards Detroit. I mean, is there a growing feeling as this process plays out for Ben Johnson and these reports come out, and they're just reports and they're sourced, that Detroit is going to be replacing their offensive coordinator this offseason at some point?
I mean, I think the Lions know what they have is really good, and I think they're preparing themselves for it, yes. I don't know who it's going to be. Would it be Deuce Staley, assistant head coach or running backs coach? They elevate him. Can he call plays? I don't know. But Ben Johnson, for somebody that was a tight ends coach, kind of an offensive assistant, to just in his first year as OC do what he did. I think the Lions are prepared, with Johnson interviewing with Houston and Indy as well. Who knows? Maybe Irsay and Tepper get into a little, bidding war here. You never know. Maybe Johnson knocks their socks off too. So he's definitely a commodity. And this is the first time the Lions assistant coach has been a commodity since 2014. And that was Terrell Austin, defensive coordinator, who never became a head coach after that. He did some interviewing. Just got to go back to Chuck Knox, I think in the 70s or early 80s, the last time the Lions had an assistant coach that left to go become a head coach somewhere else. It's been a long time.
Wow. Yeah. Thanks, Matt, for your perspective on Detroit and Ben Johnson. And for those of you out there listening, watching Locked On Lions. And Matt, you talked about Ben on your program yesterday, and I know you'll have a little more perspective on him. So thanks for sharing it with us.
No problem, Nick. Thank you.